I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni Viewer, and welcome to Genre Benders, Obscurities, and Flawed Gems, where we look at the best stuff you've never heard of. I'll bet you all have a very particular idea of what old-fashioned movie musicals are like.
For the most part, they are lighthearted, simplistically romantic, and ultimately serve as a nice little escape from the dreariness of the daily grind. In short, old movie musicals are just plain and simple fun.
That rule isn't set in stone, though, and there are some musicals from this classic area that weren't afraid to get a bit heavier than others. It's Always Fair Weather is one such musical.
A little background is needed before we get into the details. There was a brief period of time when MGM made a series of films that paired Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra, then eventually added Jules Munshin to make an unofficial song and dance trio. One of the biggest films starring these three was On the Town, in which they played 3 Navy sailors who have 1 day of shore leave in New York City and have all sorts of misadventures with the 3 women they pick up as dates. To this day, it remains a favorite of classic film buffs.
It's Always Fair Weather was originally meant to be a sequel to On the Town, but by the 50s, Sinatra had become both a megastar and a difficult personality to work with, while Munshin was no longer considered marketable and his career had fizzled out.
At Kelly's behest, the premise was retooled into a standalone tale, and the opportunity was taken to do something a little bit different thematically speaking. Dan Daly, Sid Charisse, and Michael Kidd were signed on, and the movie took shape.
What followed was by all accounts a nightmare of a production where egos clashed, friendships shattered, and disappointments abounded. But it's hard to argue with the results.
Okay, so the plot goes like this. At the end of World War II in 1945, a trio of soldiers respectively named Ted, Doug, and Angie arrive in Manhattan to begin their civilian lives. These 3 are the best of friends, but the cynical owner of their favorite bar scoffs at the idea that their friendship will last. Ergo, a wager is made. The soldiers and the bartender each bet $1 that everyone will meet again at the same spot in 10 years, and the trio's friendship will be as strong as ever.
A decade passes, and the results of the wager are, to say the least, mixed.
Ted, Doug, and Angie all keep the appointment, but they haven't seen each other in all that time, and they struggle to reconnect. This awkward reunion forces all 3 of them into personal crises in which they must reevaluate how their lives have not gone according to plan. At the same time, a program coordinator named Jackie, whom Ted takes a shine to, believes their story might make a great human interest segment on a popular variety show, and thus finds a way to keep them all in town and force them back together on the air, even though they want nothing more than to leave.
That certainly does sound heavier than something like Singing in the Rain. Well, don't get the wrong idea. It's Always Fair Weather is still a comedy, but it's a comedy that's not afraid to get real.
Here we have 3 people who were inseparable once upon a time, but after years apart they reunite as strangers, incapable of picking up where they left off and hesitant to get caught up. This is not simply because they've been apart for so long, but because their lives didn't go the way any of them wanted.
Actually, that's a bit of an understatement. It would be more accurate to say that our 3 protagonists are downright ashamed of the lives they're living. This movie basically invented the how it started versus how it's going meme years before the internet even existed.
When they got back from the war, these 3 had big plans for their futures. Doug planned to return to Europe and become a famous artist. Angie was going to study cooking and open a fancy restaurant that would serve fine cuisine to the highest caliber of people. Ted, well, he had no real direction other than getting married to his sweetheart, but he was considered so brilliant that he could do anything he set his mind to.
After 10 years, none of them are where they hoped they would be.
Doug works in TV advertising, his artistic abilities put towards making animated mascots for detergent companies, and he's bottled up his feelings to such a point that he's become emotionally distant and his marriage is now in jeopardy. Angie has a restaurant called the Cordon Bleu, but the fancy name hides the fact that it's a fast food joint, and he's had more children with his wife than he knows what to do with, potentially hinting that his way of dealing with stress results in a source of more stress 9 months later.
Their lives changed gradually, though. Ted's life changed as soon as he got off the boat.
He learned from a Dear John letter that his sweetheart married someone else while he was off fighting the Axis, and since marriage was the only thing he had planned, his life becomes totally directionless afterward. He lives the life of a playboy, gambling and womanizing with no care for anything or anyone, and his luck is good until it's not anymore. At the 10-year mark, he's managing an up-and-coming boxer he won in a game of craps, but the fights are the kind where the outcome is predetermined, if you follow me.
When they initially reunite, no one in this trio is willing to openly admit that their lives haven't gone according to plan. To each other or themselves? Ah, there's the rub. Remember earlier when I said It's Always Fairweather wasn't afraid to get real? Well, you may be surprised at just how real it gets.
There's a number early in the film entitled I Shouldn't Have Come, in which the trio struggle to make conversation in a high-class restaurant, so they retreat into their own minds and silently judge each other to the tune of the Blue Danube. At that point, their internally realized animosity is aimed outward, but this is just masking a deep self-loathing that they all have for themselves. Ironically, it's something they all have in common, but they just can't admit it to each other because that would be the same as openly admitting that they've failed to reach their potential. About midway through the picture, they can only admit that failure to themselves in private during the song Once Upon a Time. This is a brilliantly shot sequence, by the way, with all three characters lined up and moving in unison despite being in different locations. It's not just the cinematography that makes it poignant, though. The dancing is also very expressive here. It's not the most intricate dancing, and it doesn't contain many tricks or fancy footwork, but the emotion is what shines through. Even without the music, you can tell how these three are feeling just by the way they move. Then again, if you know this movie for anything, you know it as the one where Gene Kelly dances on roller skates during the song I Like Myself. This was not the first time somebody had done such a dance, but it is one of the best examples. And there's even more to this number than initially meets the eye. On its own, yes, it's an impressive routine in which Kelly seems to defy gravity and friction at the same time, and I'm sure it inspired many young dancers straight into the hospital. In context, though, it's a major turning point for the character of Ted. By now, it's clear that he and Jackie have developed a genuine mutual affection for each other. Oh, and in case you're wondering, there's no annoying contrivance that nearly splits these two up at the end, which is another nice touch I appreciate. Anyway, Ted has felt actual love for the first time in many years, and this has helped lift the weight of his self-loathing from his mind. Something he thought was impossible has happened, so he expresses this joy by dancing in a way that itself seems impossible, and doing it in a way that appears almost effortless. This dance is a perfect marriage of style and substance, hence why it's so memorable. It's Always Fairweather is an excellent depiction of how life doesn't always go according to plan, and sometimes friends can grow distant from each other. Two traits which have led to some people labeling this a cynical musical. Personally, I don't know if that's an accurate moniker. Let's be honest, it still presents a romance where the lovebirds fall head over heels for each other after less than one day, and the ending rings with a note of bittersweet optimism that's not generally associated with cynicism. For my own part, I think the more appropriate adjective is honest. The movie is not afraid to show what happens when life is disappointing, but it's what we see the characters do with those disappointments that makes the difference. By the end, the trio has wound up on the show, but they refuse to play along with the schmaltz put forward by the host. Once they're on stage, they are finally ready to be honest in front of each other, even if that means publicly admitting their shortcomings in life to millions of viewers across the nation. After this, we get a moment in which that wonderful new medium of television helps us expose a group of racketeers who are after Ted, and this results in a grand battle that gets the trio back into fighting mode. Thanks to this conflict, they realize that they really do still like each other, and their friendship is fully restored. Things have changed, and it's possible they might remain apart after the day is through, but their bond is not as tenuous as it first appeared. Sure, the future is still as uncertain as ever, but the characters accept that now. They're not going to let their disappointments color their attitudes.
but part of that requires accepting their circumstances and focusing on fixing the parts of their lives that actually do need their attention.
By the end, Angie is ready to stop putting on airs and take pride in the fact that he's got a successful roadside burger joint. Doug is ready to start dealing with his emotions in a healthier way than bottling them up and simultaneously determines to save his marriage. And Ted is ready to live honestly and start a new life with Jackie.
Had the film been truly cynical, I don't think it would have ended on as optimistic of a note as the credits roll.
But that doesn't mean the movie is completely devoid of cynicism. If it's cynical about anything, I'd say it's television.
The program Jackie and Doug both work on is a biting satire of 50s TV, which was fueled by product placement and tended towards over-the-top antics and emotionally manipulative content to get ratings.
In the movie, the program is billed as a variety show, but it's really just one big commercial.
It opens with the hostess singing a jingle for cleaning products, which she then tosses out to the audience. Then she sings a song from her new album with the clear hope that people will buy it. Even the section where our three leads come on stage, which is supposedly the meaningful heart of the program, is just an excuse for more product placement. When Ted, Angie, and Doug refuse to play along, that's not just them fulfilling their character arcs. They represent the film industry spitting in the face of television for prioritizing advertisement over artistry.
The refreshing part is that it's done naturally in the story instead of feeling forced.
Most behind-the-scenes material about this film say it's about Hollywood accepting TV as a new medium and potential replacement for movies. Though once again, I'm not so sure that's the most accurate interpretation.
Like Snazzy said, the variety show is nothing but a commercial disguised as entertainment. Furthermore, the network producers we see are shown to be short-sighted misers only concerned with profit, and even the star of that show is shown to be frustrated with it.
If this be acceptance, it's of the backhanded variety.
All of these years later, and TV still sucks. Guess the movie got it right after all.
Oh yeah, there's a lot to like about It's Always Fair Weather. It's really kind of a shame that it was a flop upon its initial release.
That's right, this movie bombed, and bombed hard. There are some film historians who even use it to mark the moment where classic Hollywood musicals went from mainstays to novelties, the end of an era, if you will.
To be honest, most of the fault for this failure can be placed on MGM itself.
The studio did minimal advertising for the picture and released it with little fanfare. To make matters worse, it was a drive-in exclusive double billed with a thriller entitled Bad Day at Black Rock, a combination that makes no sense.
In cases such as this, word of mouth can sometimes make up for lack of exposure, but that's not what happened this time around.
Why do you suppose that is?
I don't know, Snazzy. Perhaps people just weren't ready for it.
While I stand by my assessment that the film isn't nearly as cynical as people make it out to be, it's definitely more real than you would expect from the genre. The themes hit close to home, and someone looking for pure escapism isn't going to find it here.
Even the lighter moments have dark undercurrents to them.
The first big dance number, entitled The Binge, involves the three soldiers dancing like fools in the streets because they've gone bar hopping and gotten drunk to help Ted cope with his broken heart. The silliness is merely masking a deep sadness.
Then we get some more subtle moments of tragedy that go beyond the scope of what we can see.
When the trio is first reunited, Angie proposes drinking a toast to Old Bootsy like they used to do in the army, but no one can remember who Old Bootsy was or why they drink to him.
At the end, they finally remember. Old Bootsy was a fellow officer who was especially clumsy and constantly tripping over his own feet. During one particular mission, they saw him trip and thought it was an order to duck, which they did, avoiding a hail of bullets which, had they not ducked, would have surely killed them.
Their excitement for collectively remembering the origin of their tradition is then followed by somber expressions as they toast.
It's strongly implied that Old Bootsy didn't live to see the end of the war. It's subtle, but it still hits hard. And that's the sort of thing that 1950s musicals didn't generally depict.
I guess you could say people in 1955 just weren't ready for this kind of musical. That would change during the 60s, thanks in no small part to the Rat Pack, and the forward march of time would see interest in It's Always Fair Weather eventually revived, but all the same, it still failed. Sometimes being ahead of the curve means nobody wants to keep up with you.
It just goes to show you that box office intake is not always a measure of quality.
You know, I've been wondering about that title.
Usually these movies are named after one of the songs, but this one isn't, and the only time the expression "it's always fair weather" shows up in the picture is on a sign that goes by so fast you could miss it if you blink.
So why is the movie called It's Always Fair Weather?
My father has an interesting take on that, actually. Perhaps you've heard the term fair weather friend, used to describe someone who is there by your side when things are going well, but will abandon you when times get tough. Such a person is no friend at all, for a true friend would stay by your side even in the darkest of periods.
The friendship of Ted, Doug, and Angie managed to survive, and when they needed each other again, they each stepped up to the plate. At first it seemed as if they really were fair weather friends, but if that's true, then it's always fair weather for them, even in the hardest of times.
Speaking personally, I realize that I've been very lucky. I haven't lived my whole life yet. At least I don't think I have. But I have made lifelong friends. Some people only came into my life for a season and then went their separate ways. But there are other people, a great many of them, that I've remained in contact with from the moment I met them. People that I know will always be there for me and who I will always be there for. And these are friendships that I treasure.
Not everyone believes in lifelong friendships, and some people unfortunately never experience them for one reason or another. Yet I can say for certain that they do exist, and I don't take the ones I've got for granted. Even though we've been separated by miles, sometimes even continents, we're still in contact with each other, and we can still rely on each other. Who knows? Maybe even those of you who think yourselves friendless have more people in your lives than you realize, and perhaps this movie will give you a little hope. Like I said, it's not cynical so much as it is honest, and honesty is not a synonym for pessimism.
So go ahead, check this movie out, then maybe give some of your old friends a call when you're done. I'd say you've got nothing to lose in either regard. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni viewer signing off.
I'm on that list of lifelong friends, right, Omni?
Well, of course, Snazzy. We're stuck with each other for life.
I feel the same way about you, old pal.
You still have to pay your half of the rent, though.
Dang. Well, it was worth a shot.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.